I spent 10 years of my youth taking care of my paralyzed father-in-law, feeding him, helping him with his daily needs, and cleaning up after him. My in-laws treated me like a free maid, and my sacrifices were taken for granted. It wasn't until my younger sister-in-law flaunted her gold bracelets and my father-in-law praised her for being filial that I realized my 10 years of hard work meant nothing to him. I picked up the keys on the table and said coldly, "He's not my father, I have no obligation to take care of him. I've taken care of him for 10 years, you take him away yourselves." The air froze, and no one dared to respond. The gold bracelet swayed before my eyes. Sunlight slanted through the window and reflected off the smooth surface of the bracelet, stinging my eyes. My sister-in-law Jenny's wrist was very white, making the gold look even more tacky and glaring. "Dad, do you think this bracelet is pretty?" "Howsy said it's called ancient craftsmanship, and it's super expensive. Maybe your daughter has better taste, right?" Jenny's voice was sweet and girly, like it was coated in honey, so sweet it was almost sickening. Lying on the special care bed, my father-in-law Jardin, whose face looked a bit puffy from years of bed rest, broke into a smile I hadn't seen in 10 years. "You look beautiful. My daughter looks beautiful in everything she wears. Daughters are the best. They know how to take care of an old man like me." He struggled to lift his left hand, which was still able to move, and gently patted Jenny's hand. His eyes were filled with love and pride. I stood at the door holding the basin of water I had just used to wash him. The cold touch of the basin's edge sent a chill straight to my heart. It's been 10 years. I've been married to Harry for 10 years, and I've taken care of his paralyzed father for 10 years. I fed him, washed him, cleaned him up, dealt with his bed sores, and got up every 2 hours during the night to turn him over. My hands, from years of being immersed in disinfectant and urine, have become rough and dark yellow, with dirt that seems impossible to wash out of my fingernails. I am 32 years old, but I look like I'm 42. Jenny, on the other hand, is 28 and has been pampered by her family into a princess who doesn't know the real world. She even finds her father's room smelly and rarely sets foot in it. Today, she graced us with her presence just to show off her new gold bracelet. And my father-in-law's remark, "Daughters are still dearest," was like a poisoned dagger, piercing the softest part of my heart and twisting it viciously. For 10 years, I have dedicated myself tirelessly, sacrificing my career, my friends, and all my personal time. Yet, in the face of this glittering bracelet, all my efforts have been reduced to dust. It turns out that my 10 years were worth nothing. I took a deep breath, but my chest felt like it was filled with a ball of wet cotton, so heavy that I couldn't breathe. I slammed the basin down on the cabinet by the door with a loud clang. The living room fell silent instantly. My mother-in-law poked her head out of the kitchen, frowned at me, and said, "What's wrong with you? What if you scared your father?" Jenny crossed her arms, looked at me defiantly, and smiled sarcastically. I ignored them. My gaze fell directly on my husband, Harry. He was sitting on the sofa, holding his phone, looking like an outsider from start to finish. At that moment, he finally looked up, his eyes filled with impatience and reproach. "Wendy, what's wrong? What's wrong?" I looked at him and suddenly felt incredibly ridiculous. Between us stood a paralyzed father, a malicious younger sister-in-law, and a harsh mother-in-law. This 10-year marriage had long been devoured by these things, leaving nothing but an empty shell. I slowly walked over to the coffee table and picked up the keys that belonged to this home. The keys were cold and hard in my palm. Then, I turned around to face this family of relatives and spoke in a tone that felt unfamiliar and cold even to me, enunciating each word clearly. "He's not my father, I have no obligation to take care of him. I've taken care of him for 10 years, now you take him away," I said, letting go of the keys, which fell with a clatter onto the clean floor tiles, making a crisp, piercing sound. The air seemed to freeze at that moment. My mother-in-law's face drained of color, and her hand pointing at me began to tremble. Jenny's cold smile froze on her face, her eyes filled with disbelief. Jardin was in the room, his throat emitting angry ha-ha sounds. Only Harry stood up abruptly, his face filled with panic and confusion. Wendy, what are you talking about? The first to react was the mother-in-law. She pounced forward like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, screaming, Wendy! You ungrateful white-eyed wolf! Did the Zhou family treat you badly or what? How dare you say such a thing? I'll beat you to death, you unfilial daughter-in-law. She raised her hand to slap me, but I didn't dodge. Harry was quick to stop her. Mom. Let's talk this out. Jenny crossed her arms and stood nearby, stirring things up with a sharp voice. What are you pretending to be? Without our family, you don't even have a place to live. How dare you act so arrogant here? You've been eating and drinking for free for 10 years, and now you feel wronged because we're asking you to do some work. Do you think you're some kind of princess? Eat and drink for free? I repeated those 4 words, shaking with anger. Your college tuition, the money you spent on bags and cosmetics, the money you spent on traveling every year, where did any of that come from if not this household? I've been married for 10 years. Have I ever bought a piece of clothing that cost more than $300? Jenny, ask your conscience, who is really eating and drinking for free? Harry grabbed my arm and pulled me back, lowering his voice almost to a plea. Wendy, stop it, please. My mom and dad are old and in poor health. Give them a break. Let go? I suddenly shook off his hand with such force that he stumbled. My eyes were bloodshot as I glared at him, and the resentment and anger I had been holding in for 10 years finally erupted. I've given up for 10 years. Harry, I've given up for 10 whole years. What did I get in return? A simple daughters are still dearer? Your mother saying I'm cheaper and more useful than a nanny? Your sister pointing at me and calling me a freeloader? All I ever hear from you is just given a little? My voice grew louder and louder, until I was almost screaming. Harry's face turned red, then white, then green. I didn't look at him anymore, nor did I look at the disgusting faces of his family. I turned and rushed back to my room, locking the door behind me. I dragged the dusty suitcase out from the bottom of the wardrobe and stuffed my few faded old clothes into it haphazardly. I only took my ID card, household registration book, graduation certificate, and my equally yellowed marriage certificate. Bang, bang, bang. Harry was banging on the door frantically. Wendy! Open the door. Let's talk this out face to face. What are you doing? Don't take my words seriously. Open the door. I ignored him and zipped up my suitcase. My gaze fell on the only wedding photo on the bedside table. In the photo, I was smiling happily, leaning against Harry. Harry's eyes were bright as he looked into the camera and at me, making a promise. He said, Wendy, from now on, I'll protect you and make sure you never suffer any injustice. I reached out and picked up the photo frame. The cold glass reflected my numb, haggard face. Protect me? All the hardships of the past 10 years were inflicted by your family. I slammed the picture frame hard onto the floor. The sound of the glass shattering was like my heart breaking into pieces. Outside the door, Harry stopped banging. A moment later, I heard the key turning in the lock. He had a spare key. The door was pushed open, and Harry rushed in, snatching my suitcase. Wendy! What the hell are you doing? I didn't try to grab it back, just stared at him coldly, then took out my phone and pressed play. A recording came out clearly from the phone. That was my mother-in-law's sharp voice, full of pride and satisfaction. Oh, Daisy, your maid costs $5,000 a month? Ours doesn't cost a penny, and we even pay her. She takes care of the old and the young, and she's better than a maid, and cheaper too. This was recorded last week when I went downstairs to throw out the trash. When I heard it, my heart sank, but I still instinctively held back. Now, it has become my most powerful weapon. Harry's face turned pale in an instant. He opened his mouth, his Adam's apple bobbed, but he couldn't utter a single word. That recording was like a loud slap in the face, not only hitting him but also exposing the hypocrisy of this family. I took my suitcase back from his numb hands. Harry, let's get a divorce, I said calmly, then dragged the suitcase past him and headed for the door. Behind me, Jardan was raging in the room, and I could hear the sound of things being smashed violently. I didn't look back. Not even once. The city at night, neon lights flashing, yet not a single lamp shines for me. I dragged my small suitcase, wandering aimlessly through the streets, like a lonely ghost abandoned by the world. Finally, I found a cheap hotel that didn't look very legitimate in a remote alley. The room was small, and the air was filled with a damp, musty smell. The bedsheets were gray and looked like they hadn't been changed in a long time. I don't care. I need a place to stay for now, a place where I can hide from that family. I threw myself heavily onto the bed, stared at the yellowed ceiling, and my mind went blank. I don't know how long it was before my phone started vibrating frantically. It was Harry. Phone calls, WeChat messages, voice calls, they came one after another like death knells. I didn't answer or look at them. I just listened quietly to the monotonous vibration until my phone ran out of battery and the world fell completely silent. I thought I could get a good night's sleep, but I had nightmares all night long. In my dream, Jardan was lying on the bed, incontinent, my mother-in-law was cursing harshly, Jenny was looking at me with contempt, and Harry was saying, "Just endure it." I was suffocating under the weight of 10 years of nightmares. The next morning, I was awakened by a loud knock on the door. "Wendy! You little slut! Get out here! What are you hiding here?" It was my mother-in-law's voice. My heart skipped a beat, and I sat up in bed. How did they find me here? I rushed to the door and peered out through the peephole. My mother-in-law stood at the doorway with her hands on her hips, and behind her were several distant relatives from our family, all with grim expressions on their faces. "I know you're in there. Open the door. If you don't come back with us today to apologize to your father, we'll break down the door." I was freezing cold. What were they going to do? Kill me? I didn't open the door. I picked up my phone, plugged in the power bank, turned it on, and without hesitation, dialed 110. "Hello, police? Someone is deliberately blocking the door and threatening me. Please come over." My voice was so calm that even I was surprised. The police arrived quickly. But just as I had imagined, they could only mediate. A harmonious family brings prosperity. Husband and wife should talk things out. Calm down. Your daughter-in-law probably just lost her head for a moment. The police's attempt to smooth things over only emboldened the relatives. A plump aunt pointed at me and began to lecture me, "Wendy, I'm not saying this to be mean, but what you did was very wrong. As the saying goes, when you marry a chicken, follow the chicken, when you marry a dog, follow the dog. No matter what happens to Harry's family, it's still your home. Your father-in-law is bedridden, how can you just leave like that? If word gets out, people will talk behind our Zhou family's back." Another tall, thin uncle chimed in, "Exactly. Family matters should stay within the family." "You called the police? Do you want our family to be disgraced in front of the whole world?" Their voices buzzed in my ears like a swarm of flies. I looked at their hypocritical faces, pretending to care about me, and felt nothing but disgust. I silently took out my phone and turned on the video recording function. Then, I raised my head and swept my cold gaze over everyone present. Today, if anyone lays a finger on me or spreads rumors and slander here, we'll see you in court. I mean what I say. My voice wasn't loud, but it was like an ice pick, instantly silencing the crowd. My relatives were stunned by the coldness in my eyes and looked at each other, not daring to speak. Just then, Harry arrived, panting heavily. When he saw this, his face darkened, and without distinguishing right from wrong, he yelled at me, "Wendy! Can't you speak nicely? Do you have to make such a scene?" At that moment, the last bit of warmth in my heart was completely extinguished. I looked at him and suddenly laughed. "Ugly? Harry, when your family treated me like a free babysitter, why didn't you think it was ugly? When your sister took the family money and squandered it, and your father gave her everything good, why didn't you feel ashamed? Now, I just want to live for myself once, and that's shameful?" My question left him speechless. He looked at me with a complex expression, filled with anger and guilt, but mostly helplessness. Finally, with the intervention of the police, the crowd slunk away. Harry tried to say something, but I stopped him with a cold stare. Harry, I'll say it again. We're getting a divorce. I'll have a lawyer draw up the agreement and let you know when it's ready for you to sign. With that, I slammed the door shut. That evening, I dragged my exhausted body to the phone and dialed my best friend Sissy's number. Sissy, my best friend from college, is now a well-known divorce lawyer. The moment she answered the phone, I couldn't hold back any longer and burst into tears. I cried and told her everything that had happened over the past 10 years, including everything that had happened today. On the other end of the phone, Sissy listened silently. When I had cried enough, she spoke slowly, her voice calm and strong. Wendy, welcome back to life. Are you done crying? If you're done, wipe your tears and listen to me. From now on, put away your worthless pity and tears. Turn all of that into money. That's what you should be doing. Remember, the 10 years you spent for that family were not free. Legally, this is called compensation for domestic labor. We can legally claim financial compensation. Money? I was stunned. I never thought that my efforts could be tied to money. Yes, money, Sissy said firmly. Only money can measure the value of your 10 years of youth. Only money can allow you to stand tall and start a new life. After hanging up the phone, I looked out at the pitch-black night sky and realized for the first time that my life might have another possibility. Sissy quickly found me a new place to stay, a secure single apartment. She said, hide for now and gather your strength. This battle has only just begun. The moment I moved into my new home, looking at the bright and clean room and smelling the scent of sunshine in the air, I suddenly felt as if I had truly been reborn. On the third day after I moved into my new apartment, Harry finally stopped calling. I guessed that they must be in chaos. Sure enough, Sissy found out through some channels that after I left, Harry hired 2 nannies, but they were both driven away by Jardin's strange temper. Jenny was forced to take care of things, but she ended up either knocking over bowls of food or wetting the sheets, and Jardin scolded her mercilessly. Her mother-in-law already had a bad back, and after all this commotion, she ended up with a herniated disc and was unable to move from her bed. The whole house was in chaos. On the 5th day, Harry showed up at my door. He had somehow found out my new address. When the doorbell rang, I was applying a face mask. Through the video doorbell, I saw him standing at the door, holding a cake box from my favorite bakery. He looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and unshaven, looking dejected and exhausted. He lowered his posture and shouted hoarsely into the camera, Wendy, open the door. Let's talk. I know I was wrong. Don't be angry, okay? I looked at his familiar face, but felt nothing inside. I didn't even open the door. I just pressed the call button and told him through the cold electronic device, Harry, if you want me to come back, you can. His eyes lit up. Sign a labor contract. Take care of Jardin, $15,000 a month, with all 5 social insurances and housing fund contributions paid in full. National statutory holidays will be paid at triple the regular rate. Overtime will be calculated separately. Outside the door, Harry's expression changed from surprise to shock to anger in just a few seconds. Wendy. You're crazy. We're married. You're talking to me about money? He shouted angrily. I chuckled, my voice full of sarcasm. It's precisely because we're married that I've willingly worked for free for 10 years. Now that I don't want to be married anymore, I naturally have to set a clear price and handle this professionally. You're unreasonable. He slammed the cake on the floor and turned to leave. I watched his disheveled back on the surveillance camera, feeling no satisfaction, only a cold, barren emptiness. Not long after, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I picked up the phone, and Jenny's sharp curses immediately pierced my eardrums. Wendy, you shameless woman. Did you drop some money in your eye? $15,000 a month? Why don't you just go rob someone? My brother must be blind to have married a gold digger like you who only cares about money. I didn't say a word and waited until she had finished yelling and was catching her breath before I said softly, "Are you done yelling? If you're done, I'm hanging up." After saying that, I hung up the phone and added her number to my blacklist, along with my mother-in-law's and Harry's numbers. The world was finally quiet. I began to sort through all the evidence from the past 10 years as Sissy had instructed. Bank transfer records, receipts, household expense ledgers. Fortunately, I had been in the habit of keeping records, so although they were incomplete, I was able to piece together a rough picture. You don't realize it until you organize it, and then you get a shock. Over the past decade, almost all of our family's major expenses have been related to Jenny. Her private university tuition costs tens of thousands of dollars a year. After she graduated, Harry bought her a car worth more than $200,000. She goes abroad once or twice a year, spending more than 5 figures each time. Not to mention her countless designer handbags, cosmetics, clothes. As for me, my biggest personal expense in the past 10 years was a massage chair for my mom that cost 3,000 yuan. As I looked at the glaring numbers, my heart felt like it was soaking in cold lemon water, sour and bitter. Just as I was about to finish organizing everything, I suddenly noticed a very strange transfer record. It was 10 years ago, shortly after we got married, a week after my father-in-law Jardin was accidentally injured and paralyzed. A huge sum of money, 300,000 yuan, was transferred from Harry's account to a name I had never heard of before. 300,000. 300,000 10 years ago was no small sum. At that time, Harry's monthly salary was only a little over 5,000, and our family didn't have that much savings. Where did this money come from? And who was it transferred to? A huge question mark quietly rose in my mind. I had a strong premonition that there was a huge secret behind this money. I immediately told Sissy about my discovery. After listening to me, she paused for a moment and said only, "Send me the name and account number of the recipient, and I'll have someone look into it." Over the next few days, I waited for news from Sissy while continuing with my new life. I submitted several resumes and, thanks to the accounting certificate I obtained before getting married, I quickly received several interview offers. Meanwhile, things were still a mess at Harry's place. I heard they had hired 2 more nannies, with the longest one lasting only 3 days. Harry had no choice but to take a long leave of absence and take care of him at home. A man who had never done housework in his life, who didn't even know how to pick up an oil bottle if it fell over, was now tasked with caring for a bedridden, irascible old man. The scene was so dire that it was enough to make one cringe just imagining it. A week later, Harry contacted me again. This time, he had learned his lesson and changed his number. His voice sounded extremely tired. "Wendy, let's meet up. We need to talk about the divorce settlement." I agreed. Some things must be said face to face. We arranged to meet at a quiet coffee shop. He looked even more haggard than the last time I saw him. His eyes were sunken, and his hair was messy, as if he hadn't slept for days. He ordered 2 cups of coffee and started playing the emotional card. "Wendy, do you remember? Our first date was here. Back then, you..." "Let's get to the point," I interrupted him coldly. "I don't have much time. I have an interview this afternoon." My indifference froze the longing on his face. He coughed awkwardly and took out a divorce agreement he had printed himself from his bag. "The house. The house was bought by my parents before we got married, and it's in my name, so I'm out of the deal, right?" I picked up his words, a mocking smile curling the corners of my mouth. "No," he hurriedly explained, "what I meant was, we can negotiate a lower price, and I'll compensate you for the difference. Plus, we don't have much savings left at home either. You see." I didn't look at his agreement. I took the one Sissy had drafted for me out of my bag and pushed it toward him. "These are my terms." Harry picked up the agreement in confusion, glanced at it, and his pupils suddenly contracted. "Divide the property in half, and demand 1.2 million yuan in compensation for 10 years of labor?" Wendy, have you lost your mind? He slammed the agreement on the table with a loud smack, his voice raised in anger, drawing the attention of those around him. He lowered his voice and said through gritted teeth, "Taking care of my father is your duty as his daughter-in-law. What right do you have to ask for money? And why do you want 1.2 million? Why don't you just rob a bank? Duty?" I picked up the coffee in front of me, took a small sip, and the hot liquid slid down my throat, but it couldn't warm my cold heart. I raised my eyes and looked at him calmly, asking clearly, one word at a time. "Is that so? Then, the 300,000 you transferred out 10 years ago was also my responsibility?" As soon as the words left his mouth, Harry's face turned as pale as paper. His hand holding the cup trembled uncontrollably, spilling half of the water onto his pants, but he didn't even notice. His reaction confirmed all my suspicions. There was definitely something fishy about that money. I leaned forward, moved closer to him, and whispered in a voice only the two of us could hear, pressing him step by step, "Who was that money for? Was it hush money, right? How did your father fall back then? Was it really just an accident?" Every question I asked was like a heavy hammer hitting him hard in the heart. His lips began to tremble, and his eyes darted around in fear, not daring to look me in the eye. I don't know what you're talking about." He was still struggling to defend himself. I sneered and emphasized, "Harry, look me in the eyes. Tell me, what exactly is going on with that 300,000? If you don't explain clearly, we'll settle this in court." The words court seemed to be the final straw that broke the camel's back. He trembled all over, his shoulders slumped completely. His whole body seemed to have been drained of all strength, and he slumped in his chair. A long time passed. He spoke in a voice barely louder than a mosquito's buzz, stuttering and hesitating, finally revealing the shocking secret that his entire family had kept hidden for a full 10 years. "My father, he didn't die in an accident. He was pushed down the stairs. The person who pushed him was Jenny's boyfriend at the time, a petty criminal. That day, the man came to ask for money and got into a fight with my father. He lost his balance and pushed my father down. The 30,000 was hush money for that man, and also to make him break up with Jenny and leave this city forever." Boom, my brain felt like something had exploded. I stared intently at Harry, watching his face contort with fear and shame, feeling all the blood in my body freeze in an instant. I had served him for 10 years. I served that poor bedridden man like a slave for 10 whole years. And it was all thanks to his beloved daughter. And I, the ignorant fool who was kept in the dark, the outsider who was treated like a free nanny by his entire family, my 10 years of youth, all my efforts and sacrifices, were all just to atone for and cover up his daughter's crimes. I had become the guardian angel of their family's sins. How absurd. How ironic. I felt a wave of nausea rising from my stomach and rushing up my throat. I covered my mouth and rushed into the coffee shop's restroom, leaning over the sink and vomiting violently. I couldn't bring anything up, only bitter bile that burned my esophagus like fire. I looked at the pale, unfamiliar face in the mirror and suddenly felt that the past 10 years had been like a long, absurd joke. I was the most pitiful clown in that joke. I rinsed my face repeatedly with cold water, trying to calm myself down. But that feeling of nausea was like maggots in my bones, impossible to shake off. When I returned to my seat, Harry was still in the same state of collapse. When he saw me, he grabbed my hand as if I were a lifeline. His hands were cold, damp, and still trembling uncontrollably. "Wendy, I beg you, don't tell anyone, please don't tell anyone." He cried and begged me, a man in his 30s, crying like a child in front of me. Jenny was just a child back then. She didn't know any better. She didn't mean to. If this gets out, her life will be ruined. Wendy, I'm begging you. She was just a child? I shook off his hand, my voice as cold as if it had been pulled from an ice cellar. She was already 18 years old. She was an adult. She must take responsibility for her own actions. Her life cannot be ruined, but mine can be destroyed? What about the past 10 years of my life? Were they spent atoning for the sins of your priceless daughter? I felt a chill run through me, from the soles of my feet to the top of my head. Selfish. This family, from the bottom of their hearts, was selfish. For the sake of their precious daughter's future, they could hide the truth and let me bear all the consequences with a clear conscience. In their eyes, my life, my youth, everything I am, is as light as a feather. Harry, I looked at him, my eyes devoid of any warmth. Divorce. The terms of the agreement, the house and 1.2 million in compensation, not a single penny less. Otherwise, I paused, speaking slowly and deliberately, I'll call the police. Intentional assault causing serious injury, I think the statute of limitations hasn't expired yet, has it? Harry's crying stopped abruptly. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with disbelief, as if he were looking at a stranger. Wendy, you have such a cruel heart. Cruel? I laughed. Compared to your family, my cruelty is nothing. I picked up my bag, stood up, and looked down at him from above. Go back and tell your parents and your good sister that my patience is limited. I'm giving you 3 days to think it over. With that, I turned and walked away without looking back at him once. I knew that from that moment on, there was no room for compromise between me and the Zhou family. This is a war, and it's either you die or I die. When Harry returned home, the Zhou family indeed erupted into the most intense argument in history. Although I couldn't hear it, I could completely imagine the scene. The mother-in-law's tantrums, Jenny's screams of denial, Jardin's rage, and Harry's dilemma. Sissy told me that the mother-in-law even wanted to sneak into our old house to steal the family account books I had kept and destroy the evidence. Fortunately, I was prepared. I had electronic backups of all the important evidence, and I also kept a copy at Sissy's place. They wanted to destroy the evidence? Too late. The next evening, I received a call from an unknown number. It was my father-in-law, Jardin. His voice was no longer commanding as it had been in the past, but rather weak and almost pleading. Wendy. I'm begging you, please spare us. Let our family live. Jenny, she really knows she was wrong. We can't ruin her life. As long as you drop the lawsuit and don't pursue this matter any further, I'll give you anything you want. I can give you all my pension. Listening to his hypocritical words, I couldn't help but laugh. Even at this point, he was still thinking about his precious daughter. What he called everything was nothing more than his meager pension, which he wanted to use to buy 10 years of my youth and cover up his daughter's crimes. Your money, I said indifferently, interrupting him, keep it for your dutiful daughter and buy her a few more gold bracelets. After saying that, I hung up the phone. Listening to the busy tone on the other end of the line, I could imagine Jardin's face contorted with anger and helplessness. It felt so satisfying. The Zhou family had finally refused my terms. They probably still had a glimmer of hope, thinking that I was just scaring them and wouldn't dare to make a big deal out of it. Or maybe they simply couldn't come up with the money. I didn't call them again, nor did I send any more messages. I filed for divorce directly through Sissy and attached all my claims and evidence. Property division and compensation for labor, nothing could be left out. While waiting for the court summons, I didn't sit around doing nothing. I sent an anonymous letter to Jenny's employer, an expensive private kindergarten, reporting her actions. In the letter, I did not mention the truth about her father's paralysis. I only hinted that she was of poor character, had a chaotic private life, had associated with undesirable elements when she was young, and had been involved in serious violent incidents. Such a person is not suitable for working in early childhood education. I don't need proof. I just need to plant the seeds of doubt. For a private institution that values its reputation above all else, one bad apple is enough to make them nervous. Sure enough, a few days later, Sissy told me that Jenny had been called in by her boss. Although there was no direct evidence, rumors had already begun to spread throughout the kindergarten. The parents looked at her differently. In the end, the kindergarten persuaded her to leave for personal reasons. Jenny lost her job and stormed down to my apartment building in a rage. She was like a madwoman, standing downstairs and yelling at my window, hurling every vile word she could think of at me. I didn't go down to confront her. I just calmly dialed the property security number. Watching her being led away by two tall security guards, one on each side, I felt nothing. With people like her, the more you pay attention to them, the more they get excited. Ignoring them is the greatest form of contempt. That evening, Harry came again. This time, he didn't bring a cake, nor did he say anything nice. He stood downstairs, staring at me through the iron gate of the apartment door, his eyes red and glaring at me. There was no longer any pleading or guilt in his eyes, only intense hatred. "Wendy, do you really have to go this far? Do you really want to destroy everything?" I stood inside the apartment door, looking at him calmly. "Harry, you've got it all wrong. The fish will die, but the net won't break. My net is the law." His hatred toward me was no longer harmful. I didn't even bother to say another word to him and just turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard his impotent rage and roars. I began to devote all my energy to finding a job and a new life. I interviewed at 3 companies and received 2 offers. I chose a small company that wasn't very big but had a good atmosphere, and took a job as a financial assistant. On my first day at work, I wore the only decent shirt I had in my wardrobe and put on some light makeup. When I sit at my own desk, smelling the ink from the printer in the air and listening to the sound of keyboards tapping around me, I feel as if I have stepped into another world. It has been a long time since I last felt this sense of belonging. After work, I went to the supermarket and bought a lot of vegetables to make myself a hearty dinner. I started working out, went to the library to read books on weekends, and participated in some local activities. I felt like I had shed a thick shell and was beginning to shine again. I even saw a smile I hadn't seen in a long time in the mirror. The tired, exhausted, and gloomy nanny Wendy was slowly dying. A brand new, independent, and confident Wendy was being reborn. A week later, Sissy informed me that the court summons had been delivered to Harry's home. The battle had officially begun. The pre-trial mediation was held in a small mediation room. Everyone from Harry's family was present. Jardin sat in his wheelchair, his face so gloomy you could have squeezed water out of it. His mother's eyes were red and swollen, clearly from crying. Jenny kept her head down, not daring to look at me, her hands clenched tightly together. Harry stood behind them, looking like a deflated balloon. The mediator was a kind middle-aged woman. As soon as she said, "You've been married for so long, what can't you talk about?" my mother-in-law burst out crying. She slapped her thigh, pointed at my nose, and started wailing, "What a sin! What did our family do to deserve marrying such a snake-hearted woman into our family? She wants money, she wants a house, and now she's trying to drive my daughter to suicide. She won't be satisfied until she's driven our entire family to ruin. My poor son, my old man who's bedridden. We can't go on like this." Her acting was Oscar-worthy. Tears came streaming down her face, her voice shrill and her expression pained. Anyone who didn't know her would have thought she had suffered some great injustice. The lawyer Harry had hired was a man with gold-rimmed glasses who looked shrewd and efficient. He cleared his throat, trying to dismiss all my demands as unreasonable. "Wendy, according to the marriage law, spouses have a duty to help each other. You taking care of your father-in-law is a normal thing to do in a family and can't be used as a reason to ask for a lot of money for your work. As for the transfer of 300,000 yuan you mentioned, it was a long time ago, and you have no direct evidence to prove the actual use of the money. A transfer record alone cannot prove anything." He spoke eloquently and coherently, trying to make black look white. I didn't say anything, just looked quietly at Sissy. Sissy smiled. She pushed her glasses up her nose, took a thick stack of A4 paper out of her briefcase, and placed it gently on the table. "Wayne, is that right? You said my client has no evidence?" "This is what my client compiled. It is a record of some of Mr. Zhou's family expenses over the past 10 years. Every single expense, including the money spent on buying designer handbags and cosmetics for Miss Jenny and on overseas trips, is clearly recorded here. In stark contrast, my client, Ms. Wendy, has spent less than 3,000 yuan on clothes for herself over the past 10 years. She has never bought a designer handbag or used an expensive face cream. She has devoted herself to this family day in and day out for 10 years. You call this spousal support obligation? This isn't support, it's one-sided exploitation. Sissy's voice was strong and decisive. Wayne's expression changed slightly. Harry's family looked even more miserable. Sissy didn't stop there. As if the bomb wasn't loud enough, she dropped an even bigger one. As for the 300,000, you say there's no evidence? She paused, her gaze sweeping sharply across everyone present, and said slowly, "We have found the person who took the $300,000 back then, Mr. Philip. He is willing to testify in court." As soon as the name Philip was uttered, the entire mediation room fell into a deathly silence. I saw Jenny's body tremble violently, and the color drained from her face. The mother-in-law's cries also stopped abruptly, as if someone had grabbed her by the throat. Jardin sat in his wheelchair, shaking violently. He pointed at me, his lips trembling, but he couldn't utter a single word. "No. It's not my fault. It wasn't me." Jenny suddenly lost control of her emotions and screamed, "He asked for the money himself. He pushed himself. It's not my fault." With that, she had essentially confessed. Harry's face turned completely deathly gray. He looked at me with pleading, fearful, regretful, and desperate eyes. Complex emotions intertwined on his face, forming a picture of utter misery. And I, from start to finish, remained expressionless. I watched like an indifferent spectator, admiring the family drama they had directed and ruined with their own hands. How wonderful. The mediation in front of the court ended in failure in an extremely embarrassing manner. They were completely terrified. They never expected that I would go this far. They never imagined that I could find someone who had disappeared for 10 years. That night, Harry called me countless times. I didn't answer a single call. He started sending me WeChat messages, one after another. "Wendy, I was wrong, I really was wrong. Let's not take this to court, okay? I'm begging you. I'll give you the house and all the money in the house. I only ask that you spare Jenny. She is my only sister. Have you forgotten our past? Have you forgotten when we first got together? We were so good back then." I looked at those humble words, and my heart remained unmoved. It was too late. Harry, it was all too late. When he chose to sacrifice me to maintain the harmony of his family of origin, it was already over between us. Early the next morning, I left for work and saw him downstairs in front of my apartment building. He was leaning against the wall at the entrance, having not slept all night. His beard was unkempt, his eyes were sunken, and he reeked of alcohol and despair. When he saw me, he rushed over and grabbed my arm. "Wendy!" His voice was hoarse. "I was wrong, I really know I was wrong. I regret it, Wendy, I regret it." He repeated these words incoherently, his eyes red. "I love you, I've always loved you. It's just. I just don't know how to balance my mom, my dad, and Jenny. I'm too weak, I know, and I'm sorry for hurting you. I'm willing to divorce you. You can have the house and all the money. I don't want anything. I just beg you not to make a big deal out of this and let Jenny go, okay?" He looked at me, his eyes filled with pleading and hope. I quietly looked at the face I had loved for 10 years. This face had once been my source of joy and comfort. Now, it felt unfamiliar and ridiculous. "Harry," I said calmly, my voice unruffled, "you never loved me. What you love is the illusion of a good wife who can do your laundry and cook for you, take care of your paralyzed father, endure your mother's harshness and your sister's bullying, and sacrifice everything for your family without complaint. Now, that illusion has been shattered by my own hands. It's time for you to wake up." My words cut through him like a sharp scalpel, exposing all the false affection he had been hiding. He froze, staring at me in shock, unable to speak. And, I continued, now it's not a question of whether you want to or not. It's the law that will decide. I broke free from his grip and walked past him. After I left, he sent me a very long WeChat message. In it, he recalled our relationship from when we met in college, to falling in love, to getting married, and all the little moments over the past 10 years. Those sweet, warm memories that I once treasured like precious gems. He tried to use these memories to awaken the remaining feelings in my heart. After reading it, I replied with 2 emotionless words, read. Then, I dragged him into my blacklist. I know very well that his regret is not because he truly realizes the harm he has caused me. His regret is only because he is afraid of losing more. He was afraid of losing his house, afraid of losing his reputation, and afraid that his beloved sister's life would be forever tarnished. His love and his regret were so cheap they made one sick. Seeing that neither force nor persuasion would work, Jardin, the father-in-law, came up with what he thought was a master plan, a particularly malicious scheme. He reached out to a local TV show specializing in mediating family disputes. In front of the camera, the elderly man, paralyzed in his wheelchair, wept bitterly, his voice choked with tears. He portrayed himself as a helpless victim, accusing me, his evil daughter-in-law, of cruelly abandoning him after he had been paralyzed for 10 years. He also twisted the facts and made things up, saying that I was demanding a huge amount of money for the divorce, extorting millions from his family, and threatening to send his daughter to prison if he didn't pay. The program team, in order to attract attention, added exaggerated details to the editing, portraying me as a modern-day Pangelian, a gold-digging woman who would do anything for money, abandoning her husband and father. After the program aired, public opinion exploded. I became famous overnight. Online, there was a flood of angry comments. This woman is so evil. The other woman is paralyzed, and she's still pushing her so hard. 10 years. Even a dog would have feelings after 10 years. How could she be so heartless? She's so desperate for money that she's willing to ruin her reputation. Let's dox her. Let's make her socially dead. My phone number, home address, and even the name of the company I just started working for were quickly doxed and made public. The company's phone was ringing off the hook, and there were people of unknown identity loitering downstairs. When I went out, I had to wear a mask and a hat, like a rat that couldn't see the light of day. My colleagues looked at me strangely. Harry's phone rang again, this time from an unfamiliar number. This time, his tone carried a sense of triumph and threat. Wendy, did you see that? Is this what you want? Now, as long as you agree to withdraw the lawsuit and give up those unrealistic demands, we will immediately go on the show to clarify everything and clear your name. Otherwise, you'll just have to wait to be drowned in a sea of spit. I hung up the phone and looked out the window at the gray sky. The enormous social pressure weighed on me like an invisible mountain, making it difficult to breathe. Did they think that this would defeat me? They thought that by exploiting public opinion and the sympathy of the masses, they could make me give in? I didn't back down. Instead, I found it utterly ridiculous. A bunch of idiots. They took this matter and turned it from a family dispute into a public incident with their own hands. They personally ruined any chance of settling this privately. Fine. If you want to play, then I'll play along, and I'll play even harder. I told Sissy to immediately contact another legal news media outlet that is more influential and more focused on the truth. I told her that I would accept the interview. Not to defend myself, not to cry, but to reveal the whole truth, including the $300,000 hush money, the real reason for Jardin's paralysis, and everything I have endured over the past 10 years, exactly as it happened, to the public. I want everyone to see what kind of dirty and foul souls are hiding behind this glamorous victim family. That evening, I posted a new update on my social media account, which had already been flooded with tens of thousands of angry comments. Thank you to Harry and his family for giving me a free spot on the trending list. The truth may be delayed, but it will never be absent. On Monday morning at 9 o'clock, my divorce case will be heard in open court at the People's Court. All media representatives and netizens interested in this case are welcome to attend. I have requested that the entire trial be broadcast live. Right or wrong, the court will decide. As soon as this post went live, it instantly went viral. Anticipation, skepticism, and mockery all mixed together. I turned off my phone and took a deep breath. Harry, your doom is upon you. On the day of the trial, the courthouse entrance was completely blocked by a crowd of people. Journalists with cameras and smartphones were streaming live, while onlookers gathered to watch the commotion, completely blocking the courthouse entrance. When Harry's family got out of the car and saw the scene, their faces turned green. His mother-in-law instinctively tried to cover her face with her hands, and Jenny buried her head even lower, like a frightened ostrich. Flashbulbs went off like a heavy downpour, striking their panicked faces. The courtroom was packed. The trial began. Sissy stated all my demands clearly and logically, without a hint of emotion. Then, she began to present the evidence one by one. The thick family ledger was projected onto the big screen, and every shocking expense was like a slap in the face of the Zhou family. The recording of my mother-in-law saying that I was cheaper and more useful than a nanny was played clearly in the quiet courtroom, causing an uproar in the audience. Harry's entire family looked like they had been nailed to a pillar of shame, their faces turning pale. The real climax came when the witness took the stand. When the man named Philip was escorted to the witness stand by the bailiff, the entire courtroom fell silent. He looked much older than he had 10 years ago, with a weathered and rugged expression on his face. He described in detail how, on that afternoon 10 years ago, his girlfriend Jenny at the time had called him to her house to save face for her and ask her father for money. He also described how, in the ensuing argument, he accidentally pushed Jardin down the stairs. And afterwards, how Harry found him, gave him 300,000 yuan to keep quiet and leave the city forever. His testimony and the transfer records we have in our possession form a perfect chain of evidence. The entire courtroom was in an uproar. The live stream was flooded with comments. What a shocking twist. So the father was actually the daughter's boyfriend? This family is such a bunch of actors. So for the past 10 years, the daughter-in-law has been atoning for her younger sister's sins? My worldview has been shattered. Disgusting. How disgusting. Arrest this whole family. The mother-in-law broke down on the spot, rolling around on the court floor, cursing Philip for slandering her and saying that he had been bribed by me. Jenny screamed that she knew nothing about it. The scene was chaotic and ugly, and only calmed down after both were severely warned by the bailiffs. Harry's face was beyond pale. Under the judge's questioning, he finally gave up all resistance, trembling as he admitted everything that had happened back then. He admitted it was him and took the initiative to offer money to resolve the matter. He admitted it was him, persuaded his father to accept the plan for the sake of his daughter's future, and announced to the outside world that it was an accident. He took all the blame upon himself, trying to make a last-ditch effort to protect his precious little sister. Meanwhile, Jardin, the poor old man in the wheelchair who had been crying his heart out on TV, was now simply weeping uncontrollably. He was not crying out in regret, but in despair over the misfortune that had befallen his family. The farce was over. I stood up from the plaintiff's seat. All eyes in the courtroom were on me. I looked at the judge and at everyone in the gallery, my voice not loud but clear throughout the courtroom. Your Honor, over the past decade, I have been held hostage by so-called family ties and duty, doing everything in my power for the family of the man responsible for his paralysis, out of foolish filial piety. 10 years of my life were stolen from me. Today, I stand here not to seek sympathy, nor simply for money. I am here to seek justice. To reclaim the 10 years that were trampled upon and reduced to dust by that family. My speech was calm, restrained, yet full of strength. It stood in stark contrast to the ugly faces of the Zhou family in the defendant's seat, creating the most striking and ironic contrast. The verdict was handed down quickly. It was a relief to everyone. The court ultimately ruled in my favor, granting my divorce request. Considering my significant contributions to the family over the past 10 years, especially in caring for Jardin, the judge ruled that I should receive 70% of the property rights to the house we lived in after marriage. Additionally, Harry needs to pay me a one-time compensation of 800,000 yuan for domestic labor. As for Jenny, although the statute of limitations for criminal prosecution for intentional injury has expired, she can no longer be held criminally liable. However, this incident has become widely known through the live broadcast of the court proceedings. Her life will forever be tainted by this moral stain of betraying her father. At the moment of the verdict, I saw my mother-in-law's eyes roll back, and she fainted on the spot. Jenny collapsed in her chair, pale as a ghost. They were completely ruined. Their reputation in the entire city was ruined. They became the laughingstock of all their neighbors, relatives, and friends. It is said that the mother-in-law could not bear the blow and fell ill, spending her days in tears. Jenny lost her job and was burdened with such a bad reputation that she couldn't find any decent work. She spent her days arguing with her family, taking out all her frustration on Harry and her mother. The home they once painted as harmonious and blissful is now filled with endless arguments and internal strife. Harry had to sell the house that had been the setting for my 10 years of nightmares in order to pay my compensation and divide the property. He moved back to that cramped, oppressive old house with his paralyzed father, sick mother, and completely disabled sister. He called me several times, wanting to see me. I never answered. Between us, everything has been settled long ago, and we have no further ties. I used that money to pay the down payment on a small apartment of my own in the provincial capital of my hometown. I also sent a large sum of money to my parents back home. On the phone, my mother cried, "Wendy, you've suffered so much. Come home. Home will always be your haven." I held the phone and smiled as tears rolled down my cheeks. It was the first time in 10 years that I had shed tears of joy. I worked very hard at my new company. Because I was meticulous and had a background in accounting, I quickly gained my boss's recognition. Soon after becoming a permanent employee, I began to independently take charge of some small projects. My life was finally back on track. Everything was moving in the right direction. A year later, I was promoted to the company's finance manager for my outstanding work. My life was busy but fulfilling. I signed up for a yoga class, go hiking on weekends, and during long holidays, I pack my bag and travel to unfamiliar cities. I have made many new friends, including colleagues I get along with and workout buddies. I have become the person I always wanted to be. One Saturday afternoon, I was working overtime at a coffee shop near my office, organizing a report. When I looked up and stretched my neck, I happened to see a familiar figure. It was Harry. He was sitting across from me, 2 tables away. He looked much older than he did a year ago. His hair had turned gray, his back was slightly hunched, and his eyes no longer sparkled with the vigor of youth. All that remained was a numbness and exhaustion that had been worn away by life. He saw me too. His body stiffened noticeably, and a complex emotion flashed across his eyes. He wanted to stand up and walk toward me, but he seemed to be rooted to the spot, hesitating for a long time. Finally, he just bowed deeply to me from a distance. Then, he picked up his bag and left the cafe dejectedly. I watched his back disappear through the doorway, feeling nothing inside. No hatred, no resentment, no sympathy. It was as if I were watching a stranger who had nothing to do with me. Later, I heard bits and pieces about Harry from Sissy. The old house was eventually sold. Jardin was sent to a nursing home. My mother-in-law followed Jenny and married into a remote small county. I heard that the man wasn't very well off and had 2 children. The home that once suffocated me has completely fallen apart. I no longer pay attention to their news, but calmly finish the cup of cold coffee in front of me. My career is thriving. My life is rich and colorful. On a sunny afternoon, I was in the mystery section of a bookstore when I came across a man wearing glasses with a gentle demeanor. He was holding the very book I had been planning to buy. We smiled at each other and started chatting naturally. I won't throw myself into a relationship as easily as I did 10 years ago. But I know that now, I have the ability to love anyone. I also have the confidence to walk away at any time. At night, I stood on the balcony of my own apartment, looking down at the city lights below, sparkling like a starry sky. On my wrist, the gold bracelet that had once pierced my entire youth was long gone. In its place is a diamond bracelet that I bought with my own money, sparkling brilliantly under the lights. The past 10 years have been a long and absurd nightmare. But every day since I woke up, the sun shines brightly, and it is my new beginning.